The so-called ceasefire in Gaza is a racist lie. It's important to discuss this because this so-called ceasefire will soon give way to renewed genocidal violence from Israel. I'm sorry to have to state some gruesome truths here. As Al Jazeera reported on Tuesday, Palestinian security sources told them they had registered 266 violations of the ceasefire agreement, which came into force on the 19th of January, 32 days ago. Now, to be clear, I can't verify all of these. We'll go through them myself to see if they're all accurate. What I would note is these ceasefire violations include the killing of at least 132 Palestinians, with more than 900 Palestinians injured, and there is a breakdown of those killings to offer up the evidence for them. Now, imagine if just one Israeli had been killed in Gaza in this period. If just one had been killed, our media outlets and politicians would not be talking about a ceasefire. Quite the opposite. The killing of that one Israeli would be plastered over news bulletins and front pages. Politicians would be denouncing it. Israel would use that killing as justification for pummeling Gaza all over again. But Palestinian life, you see, is judged to be meaningless, to have less worth than the common housefly. And when I say no Israelis have been killed during the ceasefire, well, that's not entirely true. An Israeli contractor, 39-year-old Jacob Avitan, was killed last Tuesday. He was there demolishing structures, according to the Times of Israel. I'd suggest that meant helping to destroy civilian infrastructure. We know contractors are doing that. But in any case, who killed him? Well, the Israeli army, of course, because they thought he was a Palestinian. Underlying once again how Palestinian civilians have no chance because the Israeli army has repeatedly fired killing its own, presuming they're Palestinians. Indeed, in the first 2 months of Israel's ground offensive, of the 170 Israeli soldiers killed, 29 were killed by so-called friendly fire and other accidents. Now, it's worth just focusing on what may become the pretext to destroy the ceasefire and unleash genocidal fury against the Palestinian people of Gaza. And that is the tragic fate of the Bibas family, an Israeli family who were taken hostage on the 7th of October. Their father, who's now been released, and the mother, Shiri, 4-year-old Ariel, and baby Kafir. I've been very clear about this from the very start. Taking civilians hostage is a grave war crime for which there is no excuse or justification. That particularly applies to children and indeed this baby. They should never have been abducted. And in this case, likely by the so-called Mujahideen brigades who are close to Islamic Jihad, they should always have been released. The parade today, featuring 4 coffins on a stage, was grotesque. It should be noted, as the Telegraph say, the coffins on stage appeared to be props, as different coffins were seen being handed over to the Red Cross by masked Hamas fighters dressed in black. I say that because it really would have just been beyond grotesque if those coffins contained the remains of people. Now, their bodies have now been returned to the Israeli authorities. The 3 of them, of the Bibas family, included there. Three, the mother and the baby and the small child. Now, their fate has become a focus of those Israelis who wish to avenge their deaths with what in practice would be the mass slaughter of even more babies, children, mothers, and other innocent civilians. As the Palestinian analyst Mohammed Shahada, writing in Zetio, notes, Elon Levy, the former spokesperson of Benjamin Netanyahu, has vowed hell and fury if the Bibas family came back dead. Now, firstly, the Israeli state has known that Shiri and his 2 children have been dead for a long time. In late 2023, Hamas said that the 3 Bibas family members had been killed in an Israeli airstrike. To be clear, the evidence wasn't provided for that. We'll come on to that. However, there was nothing to be gained, clearly, from falsely claiming they were dead at that point. As a senior Israeli official close to Netanyahu apparently told Mohammed Shahada, he promptly conceded they were killed, denied that Israel was hiding their fate for propaganda purposes, and said the reason their fate wasn't made official is purely bureaucratic. The military's chief rabbi needs to make this call, and he hasn't, the official apparently told him. Shahada also asked other sources, including the Israeli opposition, who confirmed their deaths as well as what he says were 2 senior Palestinian officials directly involved in the ceasefire negotiations who claimed they'd been killed in an Israeli airstrike just prior to their planned release during the first temporary ceasefire of November 2023. We can hear this from Diana Magne, a Sky News international correspondent, this morning reporting from Jerusalem.
Hamas said in November, after October the 7th, so quite soon after, that the three, Shiri and her two boys, had been killed in an Israeli airstrike, and they then offered to send the whole family with Yarden too back to Israel, and Israel refused, saying that this was psychological warfare.
Indeed, the Israeli journalist Yuri Mizgav is amongst those who have stated that the three were killed by Israeli missile strikes. Now, the charge there is that the Israeli state knew all along that the three Bibas family members had been killed, and they pretended otherwise as part of a cynical disinformation campaign to focus Israeli minds on the alleged continued captivity of these children. Their deaths now, of course, being used to build support for a renewed genocidal onslaught. Now, to be clear, obviously, I don't know how the Bibas family members were killed. Clearly, I don't have the evidence. We do know that multiple Israeli hostages have been killed by the Israeli state, and that is a fact. There was notoriously, of course, the three Israeli hostages, shirtless and thus clearly unarmed, waving a white flag and yelling in Hebrew, who were killed by the Israeli army in December 2023. We know that last September, the Israeli army said there was a high probability that three hostages found dead in December 2023 were killed in an Israeli airstrike, which itself took place in November 2023. Striking that apparently took that long for the Israeli army to confirm this. In December, the Israeli military announced that the deaths of 6 hostages recovered from Gaza were probably linked to an Israeli airstrike against Hamas near where they were being held. Those bodies were recovered in late August. The airstrike took place in February 2024. In a statement, the military said at the time of the strike, the military had no information, not even a suspicion, that the hostages were in the underground compound or its vicinity. Had such information been available, the strike would not have been carried out. Well, I don't really need to tell you that if Israeli hostages are being killed in that manner in such attacks, with the Israeli army then claiming they had no idea they were there, what hope for Palestinian civilians? Indeed, an investigation by the Israeli Palestinian media outlet Plus 972 magazine detailed the killing of 3 Israeli hostages by Israeli attacks. As one Israeli intelligence source is quoted as saying, while attacks were aborted when there was specific, definitive intelligence indicating the presence of a hostage, the army routinely authorised strikes when the intelligence picture was murky and there was a general likelihood that hostages were present in the vicinity of a target. And the intelligence source told them mistakes definitely happened and we bombed hostages. But 972 magazine also say the following. However, Plus 972 and Local Call have learned that the military's claims that it had no intelligence that hostages were being held near Gandu is false. This is one of the strikes. 3 security sources with knowledge of the attacks planning revealed that the Shin Bet's operation division, which led the strike, had received additional vague intelligence that could indicate a medium likelihood of hostages' presence at the site. They further say that according to the Israeli intelligence sources, the large grey area between having a positive indication of the presence of the hostages and being able to rule out their presence enabled dozens of strikes that endangered and killed hostages. Indeed, when Israeli hostages were released during the December 2023 ceasefire, they repeatedly told media outlets that they were terrified by Israeli bombings and feared the Israeli airstrikes would kill them. Well, let's be blunt here. This really is just stating the obvious. The Israeli state has carpet bombed Gaza. Gaza is no bigger than East London. Israel has launched weapons against this tiny strip of land with the combined explosive power of several Hiroshima bombs. That has resulted in the mass slaughter of so many innocent Palestinians, including Palestinian babies, toddlers, children, teenagers, men, women, the elderly, the infirm, the disabled. Clearly, several Israeli hostages were always going to be killed given that level of criminal bombardment. That doesn't absolve the captors of the crime of kidnapping civilians. It's to point out that a genocidal frenzy, which was justified by retrieving hostages, actually endangered those hostages too. Bring them home was a lie as far as the Israeli government were concerned, and that more Israeli hostages have been killed by the Israeli army than have been rescued by military means by the Israeli army. Obviously, significant numbers of Israeli hostages have only been released as part of ceasefires in which prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, many of whom should be considered hostages, have been released as well. While the return of the bodies of the Bibas family has reignited genocidal fervour, the Republican majority of the House Foreign Affairs Committee in the US tweets, Hamas executed a mother and her 2 children in cold blood. This is barbarism. Israel has every right to finish the job and eradicate these terrorists from the face of the earth. Well, they don't have any evidence or provide any evidence that Hamas did that. In any case, every right to finish the job in practice means, given what's already happened to Gaza, just mass extermination. The Israeli actor Yigal Adika posted, if children are not coming back alive, Gaza has no right to exist. Other accounts variously say Israel can do whatever they want to do to Gaza as far as I'm concerned, another flatten Gaza, I don't give a fuck. Honestly, there's endless amounts of this. Now, here's the thing. I'm on team don't harm children, as well as team don't harm innocent civilians. At the beginning of this year, according to the official figures, which expert studies have repeatedly shown to be likely severe underestimates, 1,091 Palestinian babies have been killed by Israeli violence since October 2023, including 238 babies who were born after 7th of October. Many of these were in bombings where the Israeli army knows there are babies and indeed children who they're going to blow up. You see, the Israeli army preferred to attack their targets, chosen through artificial intelligence and arbitrary criteria, when they returned to their family homes. Often, of course, where their children were, where their babies were. And do you know what? They called that automated system, tracking targeted individuals and blowing them up when they got home, as Plus 972 magazine exposed. Where's Daddy? What do we even say? So many Palestinian babies burned alive, choked to death under rubble, their little frail bodies blown apart. No fury, no outrage for those babies and children. Like little Osama, who liked to play with his parrots. Like Aysel and Asa, baby twins. Their father went to get their birth certificates. As he left, the Israeli army blew up his home, killing those twins and their mother. He had to go and get their death certificates instead. Like 5-year-old Hind Rajab and her 4 cousins, as well as their aunt and uncle. As an expert study by forensic architecture found, there's no way the Israeli army could not have known who they were slaughtering. It was broad daylight, the tank was right next to the car, and the tank repeatedly fired on that car. Which brings us back to the naked racism of all of this. If you're a decent human being, if you're humane, if you're the most basic moral compass, then you believe that all babies, all children, have equal worth, have equal value. You believe that the life of a Palestinian baby has just as much worth as an Israeli baby. Those now using the fate of the Bibas family to justify the renewed slaughter of Gaza don't care at all about those Palestinian babies. And do you know what? They're not even pretending to. Literally no emotional reaction whatsoever. They are actively cheering on a renewed onslaught, which they know as a fact would kill so many more Palestinian babies and children. I'll be honest with you, it chills me to my bone. It makes me nauseous. It disgusts me. These people have allowed their humanity to rot away and their souls are black. I can't even imagine being these people. It's like an alien species. If you showed one of them a photograph of a slaughtered baby, a heinous thing to do, I accept, and you told him it was an Israeli baby killed by Hamas, they would feel anger, disgust, grief, revulsion. If you then told them it was actually a Palestinian baby killed by the Israeli military, what would happen? I'll tell you, those emotions would immediately vanish. That's the truth. How disturbing is that? Indeed, this fleshes out what the Palestinian-Canadian lawyer Diana Boutou said about how nothing justifies 7th of October, but everything can be justified by 7th of October. To those responding to the news about the Bibas family by making it clear they support flattening Gaza, unleashing hell against Gaza, in other words, objective, grotesque war crimes which would kill so many more innocent people. Well, when Palestinian militants who committed war crimes on 7 October justified those crimes by pointing to Israeli atrocities, how did you respond to that exactly? I mean, in just 2023 alone, before 7 October, around 40 Palestinian children alone had been killed. And that's without talking about decades of ethnic cleansing, brutal occupation, siege, colonization, apartheid, land theft, mass incarceration, the slaughter of thousands of Palestinians before 7th of October. In your case, you look at the fate of the Bibas family and say, unleash hell against Gaza, making clear you do not care he was killed as a consequence, but you would find such justifications for 7th October obscene. And do you know what? If anyone in, say, this country tried making those justifications, they wouldn't just have their career ended, they'd go to prison or they'd be arrested. The psychology of racism, the depravity, the inhumanity of it will never, never stop disturbing me. This whole genocide has been a carnival of the most obscene and shameless racism, with Palestinian life, up to and including babies and children, treated as utterly meaningless without any pretense. No attempt to disguise it. Well, I'm afraid this so-called ceasefire is going to fall apart when Israel finds an excuse to unleash vicious genocide or bloodshed and try and enact the plan of Donald Trump to empty out its survivors, which itself would only happen with unbelievable amounts of murderous violence. The fate of the Bibas family is partly being used to justify that. But that is not how the deaths the killings of children should ever be used, not to argue for the killing of even more, far more children and babies. That's genocidal racism, and we should call it for what it is. Please like and subscribe, leave your thoughts and your comments, help us as we expand the operation, which is only happening because of you. You can see TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, the podcast, which is now being regularly updated as we go along. So thank you for helping make that possible at patreon.com/OwenJones84. And we've got lots and lots and lots of things to come. Share the video. I'll speak to you soon.